May 2015, the mountains of Jalisco, Mexico. A military helicopter thunders low over the ridgelines, closing on an armed cartel convoy. Somewhere below is the man this entire operation exists to capture, El Mencho, the most wanted criminal in Mexico. After years of hunting a ghost, the soldiers on board are minutes from making history. Then, the ground fires back. A rocket-propelled grenade streaks out of the hills and rips the helicopter out of the sky. 9 soldiers are killed. The operation dies with them, and the ghost vanishes again. That morning, Mexico learned the rule of these mountains. You don't hunt El Mencho, he hunts you back. And for 11 more years, the rule held. $15 million on his head. No one could collect it. Barely a photograph of his face. No one could take one. 2 governments hunting him. And he built the most powerful criminal empire in Mexico right under their feet and stayed a ghost. Until February 2026, when the man no army could touch was finally brought down by a visit. One quiet, ordinary visit. And within 72 hours, special forces fighting through the trees to reach him, his empire burning across 22 states, and the 15-year hunt for El Mencho over. This is exactly how it happened. So, who was this man? Here's the part that should be impossible. The most powerful drug lord of the modern era started as a poor kid from the avocado hills of Michoacan, crossed into California in the 1980s, deported back in the early 90s, believed to have even worn a police uniform for a stretch. That's the whole resume. And out of that nothing, over 30 years, he built a monster. 2009, he co-founds the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG. 6 months later, it stretches coast to coast. A few years after that, it's one of the most powerful criminal organizations on the planet. Cocaine, methamphetamine, and later fentanyl flowing into nearly all 50 American states. A trade worth billions of dollars every single year. And in 2025, Washington stopped reaching for the word cartel and formally designated CJNG a foreign terrorist organization. Sit with that label for a second. Not smugglers, terrorists. Because that's how El Mencho fought. Explosive dropping drones, landmines, fighters willing to take on the army head-on. You already watched what they did to that helicopter. This was not crime that occasionally clashed with the state. This was an insurgency with a business model. And keep that machine in mind. Its size, its reach, its firepower. Because at the end of this story, you're going to watch all of it turn on Mexico at once, in a single day. But first, the problem that broke 15 years of manhunts. El Mencho avoided cameras completely. He moved constantly. He trusted almost no one. And he had turned an entire region into his fortress. The math never changed. You cannot capture a man you cannot find. So, the hunters made the decision that changed everything. They stopped trying to find El Mencho and started watching the people he could not give up. Enter the Americans. For a year, the United States had been leaning hard on Mexico to go after the cartels and quietly building the machinery to help. A newly established American unit, the Joint Interagency Task Force Counter-Cartel, went to work mapping CJNG like a military target. Its movements, its structure, its people. Behind that effort was a surge of American surveillance over Mexico, reconnaissance aircraft and drones feeding a steady stream of intelligence back to analysts across the border. And out of it, according to reporting, that task force assembled what the military calls a targeting package on El Mencho, a complete intelligence picture of the man, his patterns, and his location, and handed it to the Mexican military. To be clear on what that means, the Americans provided the eyes and the intelligence. They did not put boots on the ground. This was a Mexican operation. And the intelligence kept circling one weakness that no fortress can eliminate. The people a hunted man cannot give up. The break came on February 20th. Mexican military intelligence was tracking a trusted associate, a man connected to one of El Mencho's romantic partners. And that day, surveillance showed the associate quietly transporting the partner to a residence inside the Tapalpa Country Club, an upscale gated development in the mountain town of Tapalpa, Jalisco. Investigators watched. The partner met with someone at the property. Then, on the 21st, she left, but he didn't. Continued monitoring confirmed the impossible had happened. El Mencho was still inside that residence, with the security detail reported to be only around 10 men. After 15 years as a ghost, the most wanted man in North America was pinned to a single address. Not by a drone strike, not by an army, by a visit. And now the hard part began, because the last time they'd tried this, he'd shot their helicopter down. The planners knew exactly who they were dealing with, and exactly how badly it could go. This was a man whose men had downed a military helicopter with a rocket-propelled grenade, and CJNG's arsenal had only grown since. This was a cartel that fielded belt-fed machine guns and 50 caliber rifles powerful enough to punch through armor plate, improvised armored trucks the size of tanks that its fighters nicknamed monstruos, monsters, and even commercial drones rigged to drop grenades from the sky. Coming for El Mencho didn't mean facing a handful of bodyguards. It meant potentially walking into a small army with military-grade firepower, one that could flood the roads with gunmen the moment an alarm went up. So, they built the plan around one principle: he could not know they were coming until it was too late. For the job, Mexico sent its very best, Army Special Forces, equipped with the country's own homegrown assault rifle, the FX-05, named for an Aztec fire serpent, alongside the National Guard's Special Immediate Reaction Force, an elite rapid strike unit built for exactly this kind of high-risk takedown. Backing them, the Mexican Air Force and 6 military helicopters to move the assault, most likely the American-made UH-60 Blackhawks that form the backbone of Mexico's military aviation. And here's the move that made the whole thing work. To keep from tipping him off, none of that force massed inside Jalisco. The aircraft and troops staged in the neighboring states instead, holding just across the state lines in the hours before the assault, ready to sweep in the instant the order came. And the assault itself would go in quietly, not a thunderous air raid that had gotten 9 soldiers killed once already, but ground forces moving on foot in the dark before dawn, designed to close the net around the compound before anyone inside understood what was happening. The goal was to take him alive. On the morning of February 22nd, in the last hours of darkness, the net began to close. Residents around Tapalpa would later describe the signs that something was coming: the distant sound of aircraft, military convoys moving through the pre-dawn dark. The ground forces moved in and began to establish a perimeter around the gated residence, tightening it street by street, closing on the property while El Mencho was staying. For a few moments, the element of surprise held. Then, it broke. As the soldiers advanced on the compound, El Mencho's gunmen opened fire. The quiet mountain morning erupted into a full firefight. Muzzle flashes in the dark, the sharp crack of rifles, and the heavier hammer of the cartel's belt-fed guns echoing off the hills. The security forces returned fire, and in the exchange, several of the cartel's fighters were killed. But in the chaos, El Mencho did what he had always done. He ran. Together with his inner circle, the cartel boss broke away from the residence and fled toward a nearby cluster of wooden cabins, trying to melt into the trees and the terrain the way he had escaped so many times before. For 15 years, the mountains had always been his exit. The soldiers pushed after him into the woods. This time, the mountains would not save him. At the cabin complex, a second firefight broke out. El Mencho's remaining lieutenants made their stand in the trees, and for a time the fighting was fierce enough that the cartel gunmen even forced one of the military helicopters to make an emergency landing. A chilling echo of 2015, when a downed aircraft had let him slip away. For a moment, history seemed to be repeating. But it wasn't. Not this time. As the soldiers fought their way through the cabins, they found him, El Mencho, the ghost, the myth, the untouchable king of CJNG, was on the ground, seriously wounded, alongside 2 of his bodyguards. 2 other fighters were taken into custody. In the operation itself, 8 cartel members were killed, and several soldiers were wounded in the exchange. The man they had chased for a decade and a half was finally in their hands. Helicopters lifted the wounded cartel leader out, racing him toward a medical facility. But he never made it. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes died during the flight. After 15 years, thousands of soldiers, multiple failed offenses, and a bounty in the tens of millions, the hunt for El Mencho was over. It had ended not with the overwhelming force everyone expected, but with one tracked visit and a raid in the dark. The most significant cartel leader taken down since Pablo Escobar was gone. But if the government thought his death would bring calm, they were about to be proven catastrophically wrong. Because when you kill a king, the kingdom does not simply kneel, it burns. Within hours of Mencho's death, CJNG detonated a wave of coordinated retaliation across Mexico, and the scale of it stunned even the government. The cartel's response was organized by a senior figure known as El Tuli, El Mencho's right-hand man and top financial operator. He put a price on the state itself, a bounty of roughly $1,100 for the killing of every single soldier. And then the country caught fire. In more than 20 states, cartel members hijacked and torched vehicles, threw up burning roadblocks across highways, and attacked gas stations, businesses, and government facilities. Around 20 state-owned banks were damaged. Guadalajara, Mexico's second-largest city and a host city for the 2026 World Cup just months away, turned into a ghost town as residents sheltered inside. Plumes of smoke rose over the tourist beaches of Puerto Vallarta. Airlines cancelled flights. Multiple governments issued shelter-in-place warnings for their citizens. The human cost was severe. 25 members of the National Guard were killed in the clashes that followed. A state police officer, a prison guard, killed when inmates rioted. Dozens more died as the violence radiated outward. El Tuli did not last the day. Security forces tracked him to a small town southwest of Guadalajara. He tried to flee, opened fire, and was killed. But the message the cartel had sent was impossible to ignore. In a single day of fury, CJNG had revealed the terrifying truth of its reach, that even with its founder dead, it could set half a nation ablaze. A triumph for the government and a warning written in fire all at once. Strip it all back, and the fall of El Mencho marks the arrival of a new era in the war on the cartels. The takedown didn't happen through firepower alone. It happened through an American targeting package, a task force that mapped a criminal empire like a battlefield, and one thread of human intelligence pulled patiently until a ghost finally became a location. It's the same machinery of pressure now reshaping this entire hemisphere, the same campaign that months earlier had reached into Venezuela and pulled out a president. But El Mencho's death did not end CJNG. It cracked it open. The empire he spent 30 years building is now a throne with no king. And across Mexico, rival cartels and internal factions are already circling, ready to fight over the pieces. The most powerful criminal organization in the country has entered its most dangerous, unstable chapter yet, and the bloodshed that follows a broken cartel is often worse than anything that came before. And here's the part that makes this bigger than one raid. That American machinery, the task force, the surveillance, the targeted packages, wasn't built for El Mencho alone. Just weeks before this operation, the same campaign of pressure reached into a different country entirely and pulled out not a cartel boss, but a sitting president, Nicolas Maduro, dragged from his own capital in the middle of the night by one of the most audacious operations in modern history. That full story, the blackout, the secret weapon, and the 2.5 hours that ended his reign is on your screen right now. Click it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next operation.